To figure out how to best position the divs that are on this page, we can do a little math. I know not everyone likes math, but this isn't quite as hard as one of those mind benders as two trains heading in opposite directions where you had to calculate speed and velocity. It's really not like that. When I'm trying to figure out designs like this, I'm trying to figure out how big this div should be, how big this div should be, how much space I have left for margins on the sides and in between. I often have little notes around my desk with squares and boxes and numbers, and yes, you really can use a calculator. So let me just walk you through this one to help you see the thinking into planning a design like this. And if you absolutely hate math and you get it all visually the way you want it in Photoshop, you can always resort to just using a tracing image and positioning the divs as close as possible visually. But I want you to think through this with me, at least give it a try. Up here at the top, we have an image that is 780 pixels wide. If you don't remember exactly how wide it is, you can always select the image and double check the total width. So we know the total width of this page is 780. Now we know the div on the right here is 520. And we know that we set these two columns on the left to 70 and 85. That would be 155 total. So if we've already used up 155 pixels for these two columns and 520 pixels for this one, then we know we've used up 675 pixels just for the images on this page. If we have a page that's 780 pixels wide, then 780 minus 65 means we have 105 pixels left. So now I can start to think about how much space I have for margins and padding. And then we can use that to calculate where each of these divs get positioned. So let's think about it this way. If I have 105 pixels left, let's assume that I could put 25 pixels in each of these spaces. So on the left side here, 25 pixels, in the middle, 25 pixels, and on the far right, another 25 pixels. That would use 75 pixels and give me nice even margins around these main elements. If I subtract that 75 pixels from the 105, I have 30 left. And that would mean I could put 10 pixels around these two. So I could have 10 pixels on the left, 10 pixels in the middle, and 10 pixels on the right. And that would add up to 105 pixels. Okay, that really does sound like a math class. Let me just make it easy for you and show you how I set this up and what the final numbers were. But at least now I hope you have a glimpse into the thinking about organizing a page like this. So if we decided that the left margin is going to be 25 pixels, then we want this first div, this left div here, to start 25 pixels from the left. So you want to set L to 25, and we already decided that it should be 100 pixels from the top in order to be aligned with this div on the right. In order to have enough space for both of the columns and for the padding that I wanted, I need a width of 185. And the height I'm going to set to 420 to have room for all of the elements that are in this div. Now let's look at column 1 and column 2. For column 1, I want a left of 10 because I'm setting this margin based on the left div. Remember, this div is nested inside of that one. So I want left set to 10. And now to position this the way I want from the top, I'm going to set the top to 15. And I'm going to set the top for both of these to 15 so they line up perfectly with each other. We already determined that the width should be 70 and the height should be 280, so that part shouldn't change. Now, this div, if you think about it, column 2, is 10 pixels from the left, plus 70 pixels, which is the width of column 1, plus 10 more pixels if I want to have a 10 pixel margin. So that would mean this one should be 90 pixels from the left. So you want left 90. We figured out the top was 15. And we already determined a width of 85 pixels to accommodate these images and a height of 280. Now you may notice this isn't perfectly lining up with my tracing image. You have a choice when you set this up to either perfectly match the tracing image or to go with the mathematical equation. Sometimes when you crop out a tracing image in Photoshop, it's hard to get it exactly the way you want it when you bring it into Dreamweaver. So I ultimately go with the math because I know that's precisely placing things where I want them. At the bottom of here, we're going to need one more div for this image, and I'll show you, you can certainly just click and drag and place this more or less where it should go. Insert the image, In this case, we want the thumbnail called gift. And again, using the image size to determine the size of the div, this one's 133 by 73. So let's select that. So now you could calculate exactly what size that should be in order to have equal margins on each side. Or you could just eyeball it with the tracer image and get it close enough. And if you're happy with that, that's a perfectly fine way to design when you're using AP divs. Let's just take care of the last few settings now with this right div. So click to select the div. This one is left 235. Again, that's calculating the total of 25 and 25 plus the width of the left div to position this one. From the top, we know it should be 100, the width should be 520, and the height should be 440. And I made it 440 ultimately in order to have a little extra padding down here, a little extra space below the word solo, so that when I put the green border around here, I'll get a little extra breathing room below the image.